Now we've designed some interesting animated detail on the static portion of our building, but since we've set that up on the actual geometry, you might be wondering how we merge that together with all of the simulation points that we have saved as well. So here we have all of that damaged geometry, and over here we have our regular RBD points, and ultimately we want everything to just be represented by a point per piece, especially when it comes time to cache this out in a moment. But luckily, Houdini 17 added this awesome extract transform SOP. So if you drop in that extract transform and wire your animated geometry into the first input, and then we can go up above here and grab the unmodified geometry and put that in the second input. So that'll be the first output of this static area split here. We'll wire this all the way down to our extract transform. And right now it looks like it's only giving us 1 point. But if you turn on this piece attribute option on the extract transform, it'll analyze our moving pieces with this static rest shape above, and it'll figure out what the transform is needed to move this into the correct position, and it'll export a point for each piece that matches the same format that's used for these simulation points up here. Now since we're generating these new points for the static section, we can delete them from our simulation portion of the setup here. So after any of those blend shape fixes that you may have added to your scene, you can add in a blast. I'll call this remove static, and we'll delete any points that have an active frame equal to 10,000. And we'll have to flip that group type to points. So this will leave us with only the pieces that get activated at some point in the sim, and then we can combine that with the pieces from our extract transform. So if you merge these together, then we can use these combined points to drive either our fractured or proxy pieces later. Now if we zoom in on that merge, you can see we're getting a warning about mismatched attributes, and I usually try to make sure our attributes match as much as possible whenever I'm combining things, just so we're not surprised by any default values that any missing attributes might pick up. So I'm going to drop in a null for the active points and check out those attributes, and this has some attributes that we don't really need, so I'm going to add an attribute delete just above that null. And whenever I'm cleaning up attributes, I often like to start by putting in a star and then selecting whatever attributes I want to keep from this drop-down list here. So in this case I want to keep the active frame, the clump, the name, the orient, pivot, and scale. And then to preserve all of those attributes, you can just put that little caret symbol in front of each of those, so it says do not delete those attributes. Although in this case, since we're not actually scaling our pieces, we don't even really need that one, so I'll delete that one for now. And we're still getting an attribute mismatch on our merge because this extract transform doesn't preserve all of the attributes from our incoming geometry. It's generating all of the transform attributes that we need, but we don't have that active frame or clump information anymore. So I'm going to use an attribute copy after that extract transform to reapply those attributes. And if we go up to where we've applied the active frame attribute to the static portion of the building, you can see that clump and name are primitive attributes here. So I'm going to do a promote in order to copy them to the extract transform points. So I'll connect our static building with the active frame to our attribute promote. Original class is prims, and we're going to select the clump and the name, and then connect that down to the attribute copy after the extract transform. And since I don't really trust that the point order is correct with these two inputs of that attribute copy, I'm going to do a name-based copy. So turn on that match by attribute, set it to name, and then for the attribute names that we're actually copying, I'm going to select active frame and clump. And I'm also going to set a new attribute that tells us if a point is for a static section or an active section, because this information might be helpful later. So I'll add in this point wrangle, and on the static side I'll call this static attribute 1, and in the vex I'll say I at static for an integer attribute and set that equal to 1, and I'll copy that for the active side as well. I'll put this just before our active points null, and in this case I'll set that static attribute to 0. Now if we look at our merge, you can see this is no longer complaining about mismatching attributes, and we don't have to worry about any of those missing ones picking up some weird default values, and things are all good.